Today's exercise is to talk about my favourite book, which would be The Magician's Way by William Whitecloud, and that's part of it. The other exercise today is to work on my posture, to make sure I've got a good posture. I just so happened to watch a video all of an hour ago on YouTube. What's her name? I'll tell you, hold on. That's on the channel The Science of People. I happened to watch a short of hers where she was talking about posture and making yourself take up more space. So dropping your shoulders, keeping the point between your nose and the top of your shoulder as distant as possible, which I don't think you want to overdo it. So a technique, what was it? It was, I'll come back, to grab a drink bottle and hold that near you. So I'd encourage you to keep your space out. It's going to be difficult to do while I hold a book, but have a drink. So that's the exercise today, to watch my posture. So as of yesterday, look at the lens. You know what, I didn't set a 10-minute timer. That's really silly. I'm going to go and set that now, because otherwise I'll have no idea how long I've been talking for. Give me a moment. My favourite book, The Magician's Way. I speak about this a lot. The video that I discussed yesterday, that I published yesterday, I make reference to this. Interestingly, I didn't name the book in the video. I just held it up and showed it to the camera, but there's a link in the description. If this is a video, I'll put a link in that description too, because I'm always forever recommending this book to people. Now, I came across this book way back in a long time ago. It was a business mentor of mine suggested I get myself a copy and read it. And I was amazed. I'd read lots of books in my life. I'd read books by Anthony Robbins, Brian Tracy, what's his name? The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Stephen Covey, Think and Grow Rich, and likes these books like this, John DeMartini, people like that. I'd read these books, and there's all these bits of advice and tips on how to love your life. Things like Think and Grow Rich, where they talk about you've got to have a burning desire. You can't be successful unless you've got a burning desire. All these structures and these ideas. Stephen Covey with these ideas of the time management matrix. Things about whether it's urgent, important, breaks down if it's important and urgent, then you got to do it straight away. But if it's important and not urgent, it's probably worth doing. Otherwise, it'll turn into urgent. If it's urgent but not important, then you got to be trying not to have those things, like urgent but not important. Try not to do them, and then not important and not urgent, don't do them at all. Right? It's kind of idea along those techniques like this. I love Stephen Covey stuff where he talked about the ideas of meaning and identity, and how some people identify with their job, some people identify with their role at work, some people identify with being a parent and stuff like that, but you need to have some kind of intrinsic identity. You see in modern days a lot of people identify with gender, and I really run true for that, but it never that much of a great help for me. And then I read this book. And a lot of what this book talks about is a lot about identity. Well, in a sense, it doesn't really touch on it that much, but it's written like a novel. It's reminiscent of The Alchemist. Now, I read that once, but my memory of The Alchemist is really slim. I remember reading it, and the basic summary I get is a guy goes on a big adventure, gets called to go out on an adventure so he can make something with his life, learns all this stuff, and eventually comes home and finds out that everything he needed to know was there at home. I'm going to have to read that again, because that's basically my memory of The Alchemist. I don't remember it being at all a bad book, but this book I read many, many times. Similar idea. It follows the journey of a man called Mark Vail, who has moved from a big city up to a country town to try and have a sea change and a better life, and is just still struggling. His business is going down the toilet because times are changing. I imagine it's set around the 90s when the internet's coming out. So he was selling futures information, and then the internet came out and everybody's getting it from the internet, stuff like that. And he gets sent on a golf lesson where the golf pro teaches him the secret of magic, and using that, then the beginning of the book is him learning about a thing called the swing circle, which is when you're playing golf, you want to get your swing right, you get your stance right, you drop your shoulder, turn in your left foot, put your weight on the right foot, etc., etc. And this golf pro kind of cut through all that and said the most important thing to do is to focus on that end result, focus on the ball going in the hole, to learn how to just relax and get your internal focus on to getting that ball in the hole and imagining the ball itself just going in the hole. Being aware that you've got worries and you've got concerns and distractions, you've got fears of hitting people, fears of looking stupid, fears of missing it, fear of not hitting the hole. Acknowledge that you've got those fears, refocus and just swing. And I was fascinated by this concept. And then that's the start of the book. And he goes through the rest of the book as this guy gets taught by a series of mentors through the book. Main mentor Trevor teaches him things like, gets him learning at first the 7 laws of magic. The first one being thoughts and feelings aren't real. Now the idea that being what you think and what you feel aren't reflections of actual reality, they're reflections of your assumptions about reality, assumptions about yourself, other people in the world. And he goes on a grand adventure. It's not all smooth sailing. He has challenges, he has wins, he has successes, he has some very daunting problems that he needs to work through. And it's a wonderful journey and comes out in the end with a wonderful triumphs and a wonderful amount of learning. Now, I just really can't say how much I appreciate this book. As I said, I've read so many books in my life. This is the first book I ever read twice. And I didn't just read it twice. I read it tens of times. And then I got a copy of the audio book and I used to listen to it driving to work. I have sheer lost count of how many times I've read. If you count listening to an audio book as having read it, I mean, for a while I had text-to-speech reading it to me before the audio book was released, and now there's an audio book with an actual human being reading it available, which I've got a copy of too. And I've absolutely lost count how many times I've read this. This book set my whole life on a completely different trajectory. I've got a life coach who studies under William. So William Whitecloud's the author. He teaches a curriculum called Natural Success. He has a whole training program which starts with a training called Create Your Destiny, which I attended at my coach's behest. Read this book. There's another book, both of them recommend, called The Path of Least Resistance by Robert Fritz. Have a read of that. It's alluded to in this. And William's written 2 other books since as well. Another one called The Last Shaman, which follows on from this. It's basically a sequel. So we follow Mark Vail when he moves home to Africa and goes out in the African wilds. And that's a fascinating book too. It's really enjoyable. And that's one of the best things about this book. It's not just a teaching book. It's a fascinating read. It's a really enjoyable story. And he's also got another one called... wait, I wasn't watching my posture. Got another one called The Secrets of Natural Success. So that's a bit more not written in this novel like way. It's more of a textbook, and still a very good book with a lot more juice in it, a lot more actual practical applications of things, which is really useful. So that's my story of this book and my journey and how it's affected my life. Every video I do, I keep referring back to this book. I often refer back to this book. I recommend you read it. I think it's very likely to change your life, but it doesn't do it by itself. Like, I read this book many times and could never quite get the juice out of it. I mean, I used to just read it and just go, this thing is full of absolute wonder and amazement. That the lessons in here are amazing. I just can't get it. Now, I think there's something about that in life that you can't just learn from a book. I had to go and not only get a coach, but get that coach and then go on the training and then actually apply those principles and the lessons to my life, which that's where it gets hard. I mean, anybody can do little tricks and learn little things, but the effort of learning to apply what that book teaches. Now, essentially what it's teaching is that our focus creates our reality, and what you focus on is what you create. So if you're focused on what you love, you're going to create what you love. If you're focused on your assumptions, your thoughts and your feelings, your fears, your limiting beliefs, your ideas about what it takes, your assumptions about yourself, your others and the world, if you're compensating for that sense of identity in who you are and trying to reconcile that and focused on how to get yourself in a position where you're capable of achieving your results, then you're focused on becoming a better person. You're focused on not being a good enough person, essentially. It's the magic idea of your focus creates reality, but you're not really focused on what you think you're focused on. You might be focused on, I want to get a great job and earn all this money. That's my passion. I want to be rich. But if you're doing that because you've got a fear of being poor, that you really believe you're poor, that you're trying to offset, as in my case, trying to offset a basic limiting belief that I'm from a family that just doesn't deserve those things. That's not who we are. We don't do that. If I'm trying to fight against that, it's just not going to work. You've got to learn to bring your focus back and that's my time's up, and bring your focus back and focus on that. So that's my story of this book. I like to think that my posture was pretty good. Thanks for joining me.